Hi, my name is Vanessa Raponi, and I'm a tech steward. When I think about realizing diversity, there's a lot that I experience in a day-to-day world as a queer woman of color who is an engineer, but how I want to channel that passion is into my work. So as a toy engineer, when I think about toys, we've actually had this challenge in industry where, of course, there's boy toys and there's girl toys. And you might think that that's only seen in the aisles, but actually it's reflected internally in consumer financial reporting. It is ingrained into how this industry was created and where it's at today. So, what I've been trying to do throughout the last several years of being in this industry is advocate behind closed doors of how can we change this? How can we evolve the understanding of the gender binary and gender stereotypes to evolve the actual products themselves and even how we market and talk about these products? Thankfully, my company has been very progressive in this mindset, and we actually recently completely changed the business unit names. So the boys team is now Wheels and Action, and the girls team is now Dolls and Interactive. So what's really exciting about this is that it's the first step towards a much bigger conversation about the actual products, how we can evolve them, how we can market them to both and all genders, and how we can ensure that in the future we are progressing our understanding of the needs of society so that when a kid takes their product home and is enjoying it, they don't have to have the weight of society on their shoulders telling them that they need to be fitting into XYZ box.
Hi, I'm Bryanne Gilkinson, and I am a tech steward. When I think about realizing diversity, I'm reminded of a particular story which I'll share. It's a story of a failure and the impact of that failure on people and product. Several years ago, I worked in Nairobi and I was tasked with scaling a product that crowdfunded 0% interest loans to support financially excluded entrepreneurs across Kenya. In order to grow, we needed people to repay their loans. And so in order to simplify the repayment process, we built a notification feature into our product. Borrowers would receive 3 reminder notifications by SMS text message in advance of their payment due date, and then would receive a payment confirmation. If they missed the payment, they would receive overdue notifications. In building this feature, we had assumed that it was helpful, innocuous, and reflected standard practice. But it didn't take long for us to learn that, in fact, our notifications were being received as 3 to 4 separate text messages on the talk and text dumb phones that many of our customers used. And often those messages were being received out of order, which caused confusion. As well, those phones didn't have a ton of storage, so we were actually clogging up the phones of our customers with our notifications and preventing them from receiving their own personal messages, more stress. In addition, because most of the people were repaying on a weekly basis, the receipt of 3 separate reminder messages every week was causing anxiety, and the stress was exacerbated when they happened to miss a payment because then they would be receiving the overdue notifications. In building this feature, we had not fully understood and put into action a strong understanding of the full diversity of all of our customers. And we had let our assumptions and biases cloud our thinking and our decision making. And as a result of all of that, we were causing harm. And the harm was several orders of magnitude worse for our lowest income, most vulnerable customers. And so when we stepped back, we realized that the impact of this single feature had actually mirrored the inequitable and exclusionary values of the banking industry that we had actually set out to disrupt. And so realizing all of this, we changed our notifications and we changed our processes and approach to ensure that the full diversity of all of our customers was centered throughout our work all the time, no exceptions. We had learned that good intent is not good enough. And that lesson has stayed with me my entire career.
Hi, I'm Janna Rosales, and I'm a tech steward. I study the social and ethical implications of technology. Being on this path as a researcher and an educator for almost 20 years has taught me a lot about deliberating values. Because part of my training is in the humanities, we're always asking philosophical questions and ethical questions like, should this be done? What's the right thing to do? And those are deeply value-laden questions. And I remember in the early days of my studies, one of the really cutting edge fields in science and engineering was nanotechnology, so design done at the smallest levels of matter down to the molecular and atomic scales. And it was the early 2000s, and I was studying at a large university that was making some pretty cool inroads into nanotechnology. I got invited to give a guest lecture to a class of third-year engineering students in the nanotech program. So armed with all my philosophical theories and ethical frameworks, I came in pumped for a lively debate about the pros and cons of nanotech development. And I pictured the students being all pro-technology and me asking my provocative ethical questions. But when it was time for discussion, crickets. I had lost them. No one had any opinions on nanotechnology. And what I realized after that class is that the students were so busy trying to figure out how to do nanotechnology, no one had the time to ask why nanotech in the first place. So that flop of a class put me on a path to better understand what engineering education was all about and what it could be instead. We used to think that engineering was value neutral and that it's not the engineer's job to think about how values relate to design. But we now know that that's not true. And in my work, I've found ways to open up more spaces where engineering students actually have the time to think about values. In some ways, learning to deliberate about values makes engineering work even harder and more complex, but also more meaningful. Because when we deliberate about values, we question assumptions, challenge the status quo, and come to new understandings to build a world that's better for all. And that's what tech stewardship is all about.
My name is Ariel Sim, and I am a tech steward. When I think about behavior of expanding involvement, something that comes to mind is when I was working at Deloitte, and we had a partner. Our partner was the Government of Canada and ESDC, and we were helping them to redesign service delivery for old age security, CPP, and employment insurance. And before we got to actually designing any of the technology, we went out and did research with citizens and government employees and community workers across Canada, first to understand their needs and how they felt and what their experiences were around these different types of life events. And then once we came up with some technology ideas, we took those prototypes back out and tested them with citizens, government employees, and community workers before they went to development. And the tension is really kind of focusing on what technical experts, whether it's, government expertise in policy or technical expertise in software and delivery, but balancing the need of those with the need to go deep and understand the end users of these products and policies, and to hold both of those in our hands and to explore both of those deep truths. So as you move ahead into the week, think about who is not in the room when you're having conversations about a new solution, and how can you create space to invite them to be in the room with you, and how might that change the way you think?